So which dog breed actually has the highest bite force? And why is there no proof of the crazy claims all over the internet? Well, I was just as interested as you guys, and I thought I'd go out, actually test every single breed to find out once and for all. And I'll bring all you guys along for the journey. Welcome back to the Canine Show. I'm Will, I'm a behaviourist and I'm the owner of FenrirDogTraining.com, and my passion is helping people choose the right breed for their lifestyles and then to become amazing owners that raise perfect canine companions. So if you are new here, please consider subscribing. Now before I jump into the frustration, the heartache and the pain in my arse that has been starting this series, I want to answer a very fair question. Why do we even care how hard a dog bites? Well, frankly for me, it's just purely curiosity. You guys know I detest dogfighting or any canine blood sports, so by no means am I promoting the best dog for those things. But just how I find shark bite forces interesting, or crocodiles versus alligators, I'm curious about dogs as well. I'm also curious to debunk some of the crazy claims that are thrown around, like a kangaroo has a 700-pound bite force. But that's enough of that. Let's move on to the more fun stuff that you came here to see. And we'll start off with why has this series taken me so long? If you remember my original video a little while ago discussing the idea, I thought I'd be able to just go out, buy something online and get out and just test some dogs. How wrong I was. When I seriously looked into it, I discovered that nothing exists that you can just buy and I'd need to custom build something. And the parts are very, very expensive. But I pushed on and I found that I hit two main issues that I needed to solve. The first was, how do you build something to test a dog's bite force? And secondly was, how do you get a dog to bite something? As you can't just ask it nicely like a human, and the answer to each question changed the answer to the other question. So as always, I started with the dog. I wanted a safe way to test a dog's bite that caused it no harm and no distress and was also a fun experience. If I couldn't do that, I would have stopped the series dead in its track and not moved on. Luckily, I had two solutions. The first was to use attack trained dogs and adapt a bite sleeve or a bite dummy. The issue with that idea is it turned out to be almost impossible to build a rig by adapting a bite sleeve or bite dummy, and it limited us to dog breeds trained to bite on command, which tends to be just half a dozen or so breeds. So I binned that idea and I focused on the second idea, which is building a tug-of-war device that any dog that can play tug-of-war, and we can then measure that bite force. The pros of this were that it would be a fun, safe experience for the dog and that I could test every single breed, which I was super keen for, as not only can we test the highest bite force, but also pound for pound bite forces. We can see how the terriers stack up against the mastiffs if you take size out of the equation. Now, this plan does have its cons as well. Firstly, is tug-of-war bite as hard as a full bite? And how will the game of tug-of-war itself interfere with the results? I'll discuss how the game of tug affects the results later when I show you the finished rig, but I'll address the first issue now. And yes, I do agree tug-of-war bite won't be as hard as a full red mist angry dog trying to hurt something. But like I say, I refuse to put a dog in that position. Even if it was possible, even attack dogs don't go full red mist, and they use a very similar level of aggression for trained bite work as they would do for a serious game of tug-of-war. And lastly, if all dogs are doing the same thing, we will still be able to rank them accordingly, even if percentage-wise we are down a few percent from a full force, full-on bite. So now you understand why I've done it the way I've done it, let's move on to the actual rig itself. Like I mentioned, designing and building the rig turned out to be extremely complicated. I had to enlist the help of force experts for the parts that we need, electrical engineers for how to safely wire the whole rig, mechanical engineers to do all the complicated stress calculations to ensure the rig was tough enough to stand up to the claims of the breeds like the Cane Corso, Dogo Argentino and the Turkish Kangal. And a big shout out to my brother-in-law Matt for all his help with that. And most importantly, the help of my father-in-law John, who became the kind of project leader as he had enough knowledge in all those different areas to understand what they were saying when, to be honest, it was going completely over my head. And he also is skilled enough to be able to build it when the parts all finally came. So thank you to John for all the help. This series genuinely would never have gotten off the ground if it wasn't for him. I also want to take this time to thank the guys over at Flintec, as without them this also would never have been possible, as they were kind enough to donate the load cells and the measuring device, as well as give us some of their expertise in this field to help make this series happen. Flintec is a world-leading manufacturer of high-quality, precision weight measurement technologies for use across a diverse range of sectors. So if any of you guys do work in any kind of engineering fields, mechanical fields, or anything that requires measuring weight or force, then I do highly recommend you checking them out. The website is down in the description. But after all that research, all the late nights, all the help, and a bunch of designs that ended up in the bin, we finally had a design that ticked all the boxes of being able to be used in tug-of-war safely and strong enough to stand up and measure high bite forces. The rig needed to be big. As you can see, the load cells alone were very big, and we needed 2 to give us up to 1,000 pounds of bite force. The rig itself needed to be a certain thickness of steel, not only to work with the load cells, but most importantly to not break. And we had to put in a bite zone in the middle that was small enough for small breeds, but tough enough for these extremely high pressures. So going back a few months ago to my naive thoughts of just popping something I bought online for cheap in a bite sleeve, those ideas are pretty funny to me now. But here we are, we didn't give up and all the parts had arrived. The moment of truth, and it worked. Everything fit together perfectly. The steel fabricator did a spot-on job. The load cells worked first time and didn't need calibrating. And the small weights we tested were perfect. Until we moved on to the higher weights. So to test the calibration of higher forces and check the steel was strong enough, I stood on the rig. Now, I certainly don't weigh 50 pounds. I'm 6'3" and more like 260 pounds, so we had a problem here. A quick bit of problem solving showed us that the flex in the bite zone was maxing out our load cell spacer at around 50 pounds. So with some quick hacksaw work, we made some additional spacers. One spacer took us from 50 pounds to 230 pounds. 2 spacers took us from 230 pounds to over 600 calibrated pounds. And eventually we ordered one 5mm spacer instead of the 2 2mm spacers to give us the 1,000 pounds top end bite force. So we were back in the game. Time to make the bite zone itself safe for use with dogs. And we used a combination of layers of heavy duty foam and finished with a padded handle tape to give us a safe bite zone. But this caused us another problem. The foam was dispersing the weight and losing us around 30% of force with our calibration. Remember earlier when I said you can't adapt a bite sleeve or bite dummy and get an accurate result? Well, this is one of the main reasons why. So we called it a night and we went back to the drawing board. After some more planning, many more ideas thrown in the bin, some were pretty ludicrous, I had a light bulb moment when I was just filling a Kong for my dog. The rubber was extremely rigid, yet designed to be chewed extensively. I looked online and Kong also have a Tug-of-War that's made of the same type of rubber, which ticked all my boxes. A safe, enjoyable Tug-of-War experience for the dog, yet was rigid enough that it wouldn't disperse any of the force from being registered. So I went online and I found the supplier of heavy-duty, rigid, natural rubber, and I ordered us a sheet, and when it arrived, we were back to the races. A few more tweaks here, a base layer of plastic there to cover the steel, then topped with our heavy-duty natural rubber, and we had a bite zone that was safe, no steel exposed, and then the big moment, it calibrated perfectly. I must admit, this was a proud moment. Both me and my father-in-law have spent countless hours in researching and planning this device. The price was really starting to add up, even though Flintec were amazing enough to donate the load cells and the force reader, and we had it working at last. So with a few more modifications to cover up the rest of the steel, protect the load cells and give myself somewhat of a comfy handle, here is the finished product. As you can see, it's a simple design in theory. I hold the handles on each end and the dog bites here. And as the dog bites, the bite force is recorded on this handy little device from Flintec. Now, I've tested this pretty extensively before we take it out and test it on dogs. For safety reasons, as well as to test, we can accurately record the bite force without Tug-of-War interfering. The first thing to note is that any movement on the horizontal plane is not registered. So when playing Tug-of-War, when testing the dogs, I will be moving horizontally by moving the device back and forward and trying to ramp up the game to get them really invested, which leaves the dog's force on the vertical plane, which is what is only recorded. Secondly, my tension on the handles, no matter how hard I flex, squeeze or move around, doesn't produce a reading of more than ½ pound. So I'm holding on for dear life playing against a fully grown male Kangal that my grip won't affect the readout. The final test was to see if I did accidentally push the rig upwards on the vertical plane into the top of the dog's jaw or downwards into the bottom of the jaw, would it give us a false result? Which I'm happy to say it won't. No test, even on a solid plane, with me pushing up or pushing down in any form of realistic scenario gave us a higher result than even my own bite force. The only way I was able to manage any kind of force that would negatively interfere with a dog's bite force was for me to put all of my weight on top of the rig, on top of a solid surface. And even that was only recording my body weight, which is less than the claims of most of the powerful breeds. So, long story short, my goal when testing these dogs will be to stay on the horizontal plane back and forth, but even if I accidentally briefly go up and down, it won't affect our results. And my tension on the handles whatsoever also won't affect the result. So I honestly think we have built a perfect dog bite force testing device that allows us to test all the breeds as accurately as possible while making sure they stay safe and have fun in the process. So I suppose it's about time we test some dogs' bites, isn't it? Well, firstly, we can't have a proper test without a control. And I want to be the first on our leaderboard. So at least I can claim that I was in the #1 spot for at least a short space of time. So here we go. We have the Maiden Voyage of the Bite Force Tester. Now, as you can see, I've zeroed out the scale and there's nothing else for it. And there we have it, in the #1 spot on the leaderboard with the highest bite force ever tested is myself with a whopping 95.9 pounds of bite force. But yes, I do suppose it is now time to finally test some dogs, and that's where you guys can come in. If your dog will play a good Tug-of-War and enjoys doing it, and you want them to feature in our Bite Force series, then drop me an email. The address is down in the description box below. I'll happily travel to you and film an episode testing your dog's bite force. My plan is to genuinely test every single breed of dog in the world and rank every single one. And spoiler alert, for those of you still here watching, I already have some impressive breeds lined up, and those videos will be coming soon. So if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode of The Canine Show.